Cool. Hi everyone who's joined today's session. We're really excited to have everyone here. We can start off with introduction, so I can get the ball rolling. I have a background in economics, specifically development economics, and currently I work as chief of staff at a company called Good Business Lab that essentially advocates for worker well-being investments in low-income settings.
Cool. I can go
Nihar,
next. Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Nihar. I also have a background in economics. Lavanya and I actually studied at the same university. We went to Lady Shriram College in Delhi University. I work in the space of marketing. So I started my career out working at a company called AB InBev, which is an alcobev company, and I now work at the Adidas Group for the emerging markets region in marketing.
Okay, so I guess rounding out the group. Hi everyone, I'm Shambhavi. I also have a background in economics. I did my undergrad at Barnard College in New York City. And I currently work as a credit rating analyst at Moody's Investor Service in New York also. So great to be here.
Awesome. So I'll be moderating and, of course, pitching in as and when, and we want to keep this a conversation. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box or any comments. Just would love to hear from everyone who's attending. So today's topic is break the bias, and I was thinking about how to start off this session, and I came across this quote by a journalist at the Caravan. Her name is Nabila Paniat, and I think it summarizes a lot of the challenges that we are going to discuss and that we may all be facing in our day-to-day lives as women. So she writes, to be a woman in most parts of the world is to be at odds with the world around you. And the first time I read that, it really kind of, I had to take a deep breath and, savor that. So the topic is break the bias. And before we talk about breaking the biases, I wanted to talk a bit about the biases themselves that we may face at our workplace or in our day-to-day lives. So just again to tee you up, Nihar and Shambhavi, recently I've been thinking a lot about office design and how, for example, office spaces are not designed to include women. So a simple example is bathrooms. Globally, women spend 97 billion hours waiting in line for or looking for a bathroom. And this is something that I've faced myself. So many office spaces just don't account for women using the bathroom more than men, or they have fewer bathrooms for women. Same with office temperature. I didn't know until recently that the typical office temperature is suited to the metabolism of a white male of a certain body type, which is why you see a lot of women in offices shivering or wearing hoodies. So these are seemingly small biases, but of course they add up and they impact our lives. So Nihar, Shambhavi, do any of you want to kind of talk about biases you may have been at the receiving end of, or you may have witnessed?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, what you said is obviously quite eye-opening because I didn't know some of those facts either. But I think, now that I think we've had a couple of years of experience working in kind of, larger organizations as well as having gone to university. When I kind of look back, I realize that there have been a lot of instances where you've been at the receiving end of something and you haven't realized it, or you haven't realized that, because you were a woman, for example, someone didn't think about something or they had an unconscious bias, right? And I feel it is important to realize that a lot of people in our families, friends of ours have like unconscious biases as well. They don't realize sometimes when they say something, we don't realize when we may have misjudged something or had a bias. So I think the positive thing is that the dialogue has started and people are starting to acknowledge and realize that these biases exist and really break them down and try to understand where it's coming from, because it's so ingrained in the way we think on an everyday basis. But I think, some of the instances or, times in which I have felt this when I look back now is when I started my first job, for example, at an FMCG company as part of, and, I was in this like 10-month rotational program where you had to work across different functions of the business. And that was kind of your way to kind of figure out what you like to do. And when I did the sales stint, and this was an alcohol like company, in India, of course, you can just imagine like what the ratio of like males to females is like, firstly. And when I did my sales stint, for example, part of that was going to different alcohol stores and just essentially try to understand the market more, looking at products, talking to the retailers and things like that. And I felt like I was at such a back foot through that entire month. I would feel so uncomfortable because, for example, they didn't think about transport. I had to literally go to like parts of West Delhi on like a bike with someone else. When I would go into stores and talk to, some of the store owners, they wouldn't even look me in the eye. They would just like literally giggle and wonder why I've come and why I'm asking them these questions, and that's when I think I realized, and it made me uncomfortable, and I did express this as well. And I think a lot of other women did feel the same as well, which is why barely anyone was really in sales. So I think that's one time when I realized that there's a lot to be done, of course, at the ground level, but even in such organizations, which are, of course, so progressive and evolved. So I think that was definitely one instance that stood out. And then, there've always been a bunch of others. I'd like to give Shambhavi an opportunity to talk. But things like when you're in meetings and, you feel like sometimes people don't hear your point of view, or they just kind of overlook something that you've said, either because, you're younger and you're a woman and you're probably sitting at the same table as them. So those things really irk you. And that's when you look back and you're like, okay, wow, like we have a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely want to hear from you, Shambhavi. But being young and a woman is like a double-edged sword, and then being someone who looks younger than they are, which is me, is like it's even worse. Shambhavi, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah. So I think kind of just moving on from the points that I think Nihaar put across. I work in finance, and that has traditionally always been a male-dominated field. And I have friends who've kind of worked in industries, in companies, within finance, where the female ratio is so bad. It's like they have a team of 40 people, and all those 40 people, 3 people will be women. So I think when you're already in working in an industry that's so skewed, I think gender biases are definitely very inherent. But I do agree with Nihaar. I think the conversation to kind of address those has already started, which is very positive. And I think even as a woman, I think I always kind of think about their kind of perception in the world, and I feel like women have traditionally always had have always been on the back foot, and I think it's only been in the last maybe 45 years that women are trying to kind of get on par with men. And so even small things, as when you're for example in a seminar in college, like there were times when I was kind of talked over by male students, or something as simple as being I guess not being heard, not have your opinion heard in in a class setting. So I think just kind of in summary, those are some of the biases, and I think that positively conversations to kind of address those have started and are in motion, which is which is a big positive and very favorable.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I like that we all bring a perspective from different industries, but there are common challenges. So just the challenge of not being heard or people speaking over you, especially men tend to do this a lot more. They just cut you off. And it took me a long time to kind of like not let it slide. And in fact, something like this happened on 8th March this week on International Women's Day, where on an external call, this man just kept cutting me off. But at this stage, I've reached a stage in my career where I was actually able to tell him, hey, can you please stop interrupting me so I can complete my point? And then suddenly he was like, oh, I'm so sorry, as if like, he just like was so oblivious to what he was doing. So any steps either of you have taken to, overcome these biases or kind of tackle them head on?
So I think, like I'd said earlier as well, I think a lot of what's said sometimes even jokingly happens in and around us a lot. Like it happens by like maybe people in our family, some of our friends, just like jokingly, and I'm sure they don't really mean it in the literal sense. But like what I've started doing, and I'm very unabashed about it, is literally just calling them out when it's happening. Like simple statement like, oh, like you're playing like a girl, or because like I'm a sports person and I end up being in those situations a lot, like with, of course, like people of the other gender as well, or oh, like don't cry like a girl, or like why are you reacting like a girl, like things like that, that people just don't realize that they say, as well as just I think people in closer settings, when they have these expectations of you because you're a female, right? And like I think we're at that stage where probably, like, I guess mid to late 20s, where people have expectations of, okay, now what, like, yeah, you've studied, you've worked for a while, so like when are you going to settle down, like questions like that, obviously you can also jokingly brush off, but you don't realize the kind of pressure that it starts putting on you. And you feel like the constant need to shove that off. So I think just calling people out on those things and being a little stern about like how I probably don't agree with it or how it's not right. That those are things that I've at least started in like my more intimate settings, and when it does happen at work as well, I think just like calling it out. I don't think it's happened to a level where I've had to escalate it to management or anything, thankfully. But if it has to get to that point, I guess that's what it will take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shambhavi.
Sorry. Yeah, I think kind of, again, moving off of the points that Nihar made, I think one thing that you can really do, at work or otherwise is just be assertive. I think that, making sure that your points are heard, your opinion is heard, I think is very important. And also, sometimes when you're, again, in a social setting, I think, um, sometimes there are conversations that, as Nihar said, people don't realize that I think, you know, uh, points they're making or things that they're saying can be construed as, biased as women, biased toward women. And I think that, kind of having those conversations with those people, either one-on-one or, kind of maybe pulling them to the side and saying, hey, this is not okay. And, kind of giving them that sense of, checks and balances is very important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. So we'll move to talk about women's participation in the labor force and women in leadership. I'm sure both of you are already aware that the female labor force participation rate in India is really low. It's at about 20% right now, and it's been declining even as the economy has been growing. And in an exact flip of the labor force participation rate, 80% women engage in unpaid domestic chores, whereas only around 26% of men do. And it's not that the women who are outside the labor force don't want to work. An analysis by economist Rohini Pandey shows that 30% of the women who are outside of the labor force want to engage in paid work, but it's still not happening. So, what do you think are barriers that are holding women back to first enter the labor force? And then once they enter the labor force, what is holding them back to take up leadership roles?
I can kind of start us
Go for
off.
it. Yeah.
So I think, firstly, Lavanya, I think the problem really is when, women kind of decide that they want to, have families and they want to kind of take a career break. So they exit the workforce, let's say at the age of 30. And, they have children and, 10 years on, they're like, I want to kind of come back to work. And I think the problem really is, it's two-pronged. I think, number one, I don't think, globally this is an issue. I guess in India specifically, because we have large families, we have, parents kind of close by, childcare is not such a problem. But I think globally, the issue of childcare is very pertinent because, when women want to go back to work, who's going to look after their children? And a lot of people can afford to bring in paid, babysitters or I guess nannies to kind of come in and look after their kids. So I think proper childcare is one major obstacle, and I think number two is really proper, rejoining the workforce programs in place. I think large organizations, some banks have kind of started. Making strides in promoting these programs, but I think largely, those those programs still don't exist. And I think that's a big barrier, because when women don't feel like they can comfortably kind of make the switch, they just end up never making the switch, and they might end up I think moving toward a career path, or a job that they may be they may be more than qualified for, just because it's easier to kind of integrate into.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, what you're saying is pretty head on. I think more for the US context, there was a study that tracked graduates of Harvard Business School, both men and women, for a long period of time, and they actually found that the gender pay earnings gap after like 10, 20 years was because a lot of women dropped out due to childcare. So that's definitely a very important point. Nehal, do you
And
want to pitch in?
I think just like kind of adding on to that, like I think work from home has really also brought this whole debate to life, because a lot of women and people who I work with as well, who have young kids at home, who are obviously having to like homeschool them, but they're able to kind of be around them and care for them more, are now finding it harder than a lot of other people who don't have those responsibilities to come back to work permanently, right? Because they realize it's as important to also be there at the initial stage of when your kid is growing up, but why should you have to compromise work for that, or why should your growth stop, or why should you be at the back foot? And I think that's, like, I haven't been in that position, but I can only imagine how frustrating that is, because you're having to choose between the two most important things, and there's no one else who can do that on your behalf. No matter how close you might be to anyone else, no one's going to take that responsibility for you. So they're both as important as each other. And I've spoken to women who've been in that position, and they're like, I'm not any less ambitious than I was before I had a child. Like, I'm the same person. It's just that I want these two things, and they need to kind of be able to. They need to work. So I think there's a lot to be done on making those flexible options possible for people who do need them. Talented people who deserve to kind of have those options as well. But I think it also, of course, starts a lot earlier on, maybe like in a country like ours, just at the level of education, where a lot of women or, young girls don't go to school, or if they do go to school or college, they drop out, and then they don't have like the kind of skill sets that they would need at that stage to kind of move into the workforce, or they move into, like Shambhavi said, areas of work which they're overqualified for, things that they aren't really sustainable and are just like an interim way for them to earn wages and things like that. So I think there's a lot to be done at that foundation stage as well, for them to truly be able to excel and be at par with men. And then, of course, then comes the other barrier, which is when you do want to have a family and things like that. You're having to take that career break, and what that means for you, and whether you'd be able to come back after that. Also, things like just being mobile. I think people who would like to truly excel in their careers and have a mobile career to be able to really get to wherever they want to get outside of their country, I feel like women really struggle more with that as well. Like, I've heard so many people in large organizations, women saying, I'm not mobile because my husband's job is in India. And I'm always thinking, like, that's such a frustrating thing to deal with, because you're automatically cutting off so many opportunities for yourself. And is the man doing that? Are they saying no or yes to things? So
Yeah.
these are just some of my
Yeah,
thoughts.
yeah, definitely. And I think at the end of it all, the hardest part of it is changing gender norms, which is what this goes at the core of. Things like how many organizations don't have paternity leave. There's only maternity leave. So you automatically assume that
Yeah.
childcare is the woman's responsibility. And there's no even structural avenue for men to take up that responsibility, even if they want to.
Yeah.
In fact, tying some of these points to the context of my work, I work a lot with female garment workers, so that's a very different demographic than us. And for them, work from home is not an option. They have to show up at work. And so many garment workers that I've spoken to, they are working, like if they're pregnant, they work till the last day, till they get their labor pain or whatever, because they just don't want to. Every day for them counts in the factory, because they're living, like they're making every day needs met just by that. And then after they come back, the good thing in India, and of course this is not implemented across the board, but at least in large factories, they're required to have a creche. So if you have more than, I think, 50 employees, you must have a childcare facility, and government officials can inspect that. And again, talking to a lot of government workers, they have told me that one of the big reasons they came back to work was because they could bring their child with them. Otherwise, there was no one to take care of their child at home. Cool. Any at this point, any questions from anyone else, from both of you, or anyone in the audience? Okay. Oh, I see Arjun.
Yes.
Hi, I was just just getting. I mean, when we decided on this topic, and thanks for joining us, Lavanya, Nihar, Shambhavi. It is just delightful to put this panel together. But when I was just putting this thing together, break the bias seemed like just another buzzword going around in the internet. However, after listening to the three of you speak, it seems that what resonated most was to hear your stories and also your colleagues or friends and what they've been experiencing or what their thoughts are on this topic. So thanks for sharing all of that. A larger issue I feel, which I might want to sort of comment on, was generally creating communities of authentic care and being that genuine sort of environment where the needs of the individuals we work with or interact with or collaborate and cooperate with uh, is something that we need to also have a look at from all perspectives. And very often, the dialogue of just the basics of figuring out the needs of an individual for security or something, a significance, a purpose in their work, in their life. Uh, Things like having that sense of satisfaction to establish heart to heart connections with people despite gender issues. So I think there are so many things that we need to empathize with, and this is a very important topic of discussion. So, just to ask a question related to this, what communities of care, and I use the phrase communities of care because there's a whole subject around this matter, where the needs of individuals have to be addressed, and empathizing with those needs is a very important aspect. So, what communities of care have you been a part of and you felt emboldened, strengthened, and in that collaborative environment found your voice? So, you want to go first, Lavanya?
Okay, sure. Um, I think definitely communities with other women, and this in fact ties back to my college experience. I think because I went to an all women's college for my undergrad, it really helped me see the value of female friendships and how strong you can be when you have other women supporting you. I do think that socially we are conditioned to kind of compete with each other, whether it's over boys or whether it's over work. Like sometimes you don't even realize, but unconsciously you just start seeing another woman as a threat. And I think I unlearned a lot of that at LSR. So having communities of women, even now at work, I have peer mentors both at my company and outside my company who are in a similar space. And talking to them, having free flowing conversations about similar challenges that we're facing, how we're overcoming those challenges. And then third, I think it's not just, of course, about women. This is not a women versus men matter. It's a matter for all of us because at the end of the day, patriarchy also disadvantages men in terms of expectations that are placed on them, and also other communities like trans women or people from lower caste backgrounds. And I think allies in all those forms. So, for example, my bosses at my current company, all three of them are men, but they're amazing allies. They really believe in me. They push me. They mentor me. So I think generally surrounding myself with people who believe in me and push me to become a better version of myself every day, both men, women, across the spectrum, I would say.
Nihar, would you like to
Yeah,
add
I
something? Yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
I honestly I completely like resonate with what Lavanya said. So I don't want to kind of rehash a lot of the stuff, but I think what we both have in common is that we both went to LSR and we both went to all women's institutions. And I think for me that was honestly like a life-changing experience because Arjun, I'd worked with you and I was going to apply to university. I applied to universities in the UK and Singapore and all of that. And by the end of it I ended up going to LSR because I got like the course of my choice, which was economics. And I remember the first couple of times that I went to college, like I was very lost because I was like, okay, I didn't think I would be going to an all girls college like in Delhi. Like I always imagined myself like being in another country and like having a very different college experience. So those superficial things really spooked me. And when I think a couple of months in, when I started immersing myself in like a lot of the community aspect of the institution, which was like the social service, a lot of our debating societies, a lot of our other clubs that we have, as well as just the female friends that I found there, I really think that that's been a very like a very, I think, critical period of my life where things have I've really opened my eyes to women also of like all kinds of backgrounds, like from very, very diverse, areas of the country and what they bring, and just like that ambition that is within women, within women to succeed and all of that. So I think for me, that's really strengthened my belief in this subject as well, and how far I think it can go. And apart from that, yeah, just surrounding myself with people at work as well who I think are in with this dialogue and who understand what I want from my career or my life and who are supportive of that. And then if people aren't, then calling them out, or just like, I guess, removing myself from those situations, is I guess the way that I've been treating it.
Shambhavi, I know when you were thinking of college and studying abroad, it was always back of your mind that, okay, how do I compare an all women's college with a college with which is a co-ed institution? What were your thoughts while making that decision to have all women's colleges on your list, and then traveling to another country and experiencing not just that whole new environment, and also grappling with the reality of being in an all women's college, the good and maybe the learnings that you had from maybe the biases you held in your mind back then about life in general?
I think for me, it was when I first kind of set foot at at on the Barnard campus. For me, it was a little um, I was a little shocked. Like I was still in shock because I was I went to a co-ed high school and school for 12 years of my life. So being, I think, in an environment with only kind of women was a little shocking in the beginning. But I think one of the things that really stood out to me when I did apply to Barnard was that a lot of I always from the get-go, I knew that I kind of wanted to be an econ major. And, Barnard has an excellent economics department. And what really stood out to me was that a majority of their faculty is women. So they're, women economists. And they were, they're all excellent in their field. They're well-renowned. And I think that, more than going to a women's college, I think what was really important for me was being taught by women who are, scholars in their respective fields of, within economics. So I think that was definitely one major deciding factor. And I think, going to Barnard, I think was, I tell people it changed my life for the better. I think those 4 years. Because it really taught me how to be assertive. It taught me how to think independently. And it really taught me how to be my own person in a world where sometimes it's difficult for you to realize who you really are, because you're in an environment where you're constantly kind of fighting to be on an equal footing. But I guess in at Barnard, when you start in an environment of women on an equal footing, it's a very empowering feeling. And I think that really kind of resonated with me. And it's been a really one of the best experiences of my life. So.
Thanks for sharing. The other thing which I feel our audiences would gain from is over a period of time, if you could share certain resources that you stumbled upon, online sort of community groups, or even in-person sort of groups in cities that you're in, that became sort of that community of care, or the pillars for that community of care. How would you want to do this? You could list a few things even after this session, and we could post it in the captions. But if you have something in mind, please go ahead and share that. Something unique that you came across and now you want to share with the world.
Yeah, I can share a list later and think more about this, but immediately what comes to my mind is, and because all three of us are from an econ background, there's this community called Women in Econ and Policy. So it's about 1,000 people now, more India focused, of women working in this space, and they host a lot of talks by, say, women leaders who are much ahead in the same field in their career, or they curate a lot of resources around job hunting, even things like what you should ask for when you're interviewing for a job, what is a good salary to ask for. Again, because of gendered biases, women are one less likely to apply for jobs because they tend to feel that they are underqualified. They are less likely to ask for a pay rise. They are less likely to ask for a higher salary. So they really support in all those aspects. So women in econ policy is definitely a community I recommend for someone interested in this field.
That's awesome. I'll definitely check that out. I think a community that I recently joined is called Leap.club. It's like an all women's community. I think started a year ago, if I'm not wrong. And I found it to at least be very useful because I've ended up connecting with so many people for so many different things. Sometimes people reach out to me for advice within the marketing space, and I've loved like sharing my thoughts and being able to help them with their small businesses, of course. And then I think the other thing is also whenever I wanted help with something, everyone's been so forthcoming and just like, sharing advice, sharing resources and sharing inputs, job postings, discussions. They have different clubhouses. So I think that it's a very enriching community to be part of. Haven't like explored it as much as I think I should be, but definitely something that I'm going to be spending more time on. And I think the other communities for me are, I guess, more personal, like fitness communities, within the city. I think boxing is one thing that I'm going to get back to doing now that things have opened up, and things like that. But I'll give it more thought and share like a bunch of other things as well.
Yeah, I would say that so I think one of the things that really kind of helped me, both when I was at Barnard and now that I'm kind of a graduate, I think kind of connecting with people who went to your school, so alumni, essentially who are in your field, I think was super important. For me, I think that kind of gave me it was a community of care because I think they kind of gave me really good career advice and they kind of helped me inadvertently make connections that got me to my present job. So I think that kind of connecting with women alumni in your at your college or university is very empowering and can really go a long way. I have kind of mentors who I would just call, and we would kind of get coffee or something, once in a while, outside of that career advice relationship. So I think when you kind of nurture those relationships, I think they can kind of go really far and you can get a lot out of them. So.
Thank you. I think that was pretty much it from my side, and love to continue this conversation. But in the interest of time, maybe we can do one more topic if that works for you. It could be related to
Yeah.
work that you have. We could even digress from the main agenda today, but sort of broaden it and say, okay, uh, how does your work, say, being studying economics, and then related to your work, what would you signal as something in the future that you're looking forward to doing? More of your own personal sort of goals and how you're thinking about it. So for all women and men viewing, this would be an inspiration, or at least get career direction. So go ahead, Lavanya. We'll go in the same order.
Wow. I always have to start. Okay, fine. I think, well, a couple of things. One, I definitely really love the mission of the work that I'm doing right now. So I plan to stick with it, whether at the same company or outside. And in fact, that's something I learned from one of my peer mentors who works in the sustainability space, but at a different company. And she gave me this advice once that if you found something that you love, that you're excited about, to get up every day and do this, you don't have to necessarily jump around, because that's something we see a lot of people doing in our age group. And of course, having different experiences is also crucial for your growth and for you to figure out what really works for you. But once you do stumble upon, and a lot of times it's by chance, on something that really makes you tick, I think it's worthwhile to stick with it, because it's only with time that you are able to develop a certain level of in-depth knowledge and expertise. So broadly speaking, I do want to continue working in the sustainability space with a focus on gender and worker well-being. Another passion of mine, which I've newly discovered because of my role at GBL, is building organizational culture and people-oriented policies. Again, it's so crucial for inclusion of everybody. So cementing a culture of care, of community within the organization, of a culture that's collaborative, that's kind. Of course, still results oriented and productivity oriented, but treats people and as human beings and not as machines that are there to just, extract some output out of. So that's also organizational development is something I'm quite interested in. I'm also, and this is an open offer, I love mentoring. It's something I started doing more recently because now I do feel I have enough to also give back. So in fact, through Women in Econ Policy, I was a mentor for their program for women from underrepresented backgrounds. So these were econ students from tier 2, tier 3 colleges who don't have access to the same resources as say someone going to an LSR. So yeah, I'm very open for people to reach out to me, ask for career advice or anything else. And if someone listening this wants to do that, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm also, I think, in a space because I've been working in marketing for a couple of years across, different brands with different, of course, missions and objectives. But I think the current brand that I'm working for and the space that I'm working in is something that is very satisfying for me because I've always been like a avid kind of sports person and fitness enthusiast. So, having to kind of work on that mission to change and inspire people through the power of sport every day is something that really, really sticks with me. So I find it very hard to imagine ejecting myself from that and going and doing something and then possibly wanting to come back and do this at the end as well. It's like a circle. So before kind of thinking of jumping around and having different experiences that take me outside of this, I want to see how much I can explore within this space. Also, another interesting thing is that like within kind of the narrative that we are, of course, building and trying to, the women narrative is something that we're actually focusing on as well, because just if you look at even the sporting industry, the dropout rates of girls in sport at a very young age for things such as their menstrual cycle or even like childcare and all of those things is such a big kind of obstacle in the career journey of women. And I think just celebrating those stories and really like creating that narrative not just in India but globally is something that we're embarking upon in a huge way. And I'm kind of part of the core team that is leading that narrative and objective as well. So it's keeping me excited and inspired, and if I can do this in different parts of the world in different forms, that definitely will keep me engaged. And if somewhere down the line I feel like I want to go back to studying, and I think studying is also evolving so much. There are so many different ways in which you can study and what you can study. So I really just want to be very sure about it before I exit, to know what I'm going to get after that, and whether if I want to come back to the same place, then why do that in the first place. So lots of thoughts, honestly, haven't fully decided. I think still in a very exploratory phase right now. But yeah, that's where I'm at. And I think I found some fantastic mentors as well within my organization, both of them and even outside, and most of which are actually women, because I just feel like, the connect that women are able to strike with each other and the way they're able to understand each other is amazing. So if anyone out there who's, I guess, in college and school and wants some advice in the space of marketing or just things like this, I'd also be happy to kind of put my hat in the ring. Cool, that's it from me.
So I guess just rounding us up, I think I personally really believe in skill building and kind of acquiring skills and kind of improving your brand as a person. So personally, I work in finance. So at this stage of my career and life, I'm kind of working to kind of build more skills and become a more holistic financial analyst. So I'm, aside from kind of exploring, different aspects of my current job, I'm also working on getting my my CFA. And I think that it's so important for women, especially, to continue to skill build. Whatever field you're in, it's really important to keep reinventing yourself, to keep making sure that you're building on your brand and your skills. And I think that that will increasingly kind of help women get on equal footing with men. And I think, like I think Lavanya and Nihar have already kind of spoken about, uh, I find myself really empowered at work because of the abundance of women in kind of leadership roles around me. For example, my so I recently kind of switched positions within the company, but my last position, my immediate boss was a lady, was a female, and her boss was a woman, and then my immediate boss kind of moved to another portion of the company, so her replacement was also a woman. So it's I think that you need to kind of keep making those connections and keep um, I think having those those relationships in place so that you can kind of, if you have a problem, if you have questions, you have someone who you can go to and who would kind of will build you up and help you kind of get more opportunities at work. So I think those are the two kind of things that I want to continue doing professionally. And I think I guess on a less on a more social or personal note, I want to continue. I used to paint and draw when I was in school, so I want to kind of continue doing that. I kind of lost touch in college and now in the initial years of work, but I want to kind of start picking that up over over the weekends, and also kind of get back to doing more traveling, hopefully soon after COVID is over, and also just being I guess more present and and happy in the moment. I think we often kind of look we're in the moment, but we're always kind of thinking 5 years ahead. So I think just being more present is a goal of mine.
Yeah, that's in fact just on the hobby, but I got back to dancing last year after 6 years. And it's really wonderful to connect with something that made you happy as a child and just do it for no other reason except that it brings you joy. So I'm really happy that you're picking up painting again.
Yeah, it's been super fun. So
Yeah, it's lovely to have hosted you today and hearing everything. I think basic humanism is so important at this stage to understand the need for self-expression, use be it art or at work, or just having that satisfaction that you have it all under control, or things will fall in place because you're kind of connected to what you love doing. And just hearing your stories of striving, thriving, fighting, challenging the stereotype, it's so fascinating. So thank you again for joining us. For people listening in, thanks again for being part of this conversation. Look forward to having more such events in the future. All the best, everyone. Bye.
yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.